Well, welcome to everybody for joining us for this webinar. We hope it's going to be a really useful webinar for everybody because got here a few of the judges from the Independent Schools of the Year Awards, and they're going to talk a little bit about what it is we're really looking for in our awards, because the purpose of these awards is really to celebrate the student experience in schools, and we want to help you do that. So I'm first of all just going to ask the judges who are here, just a few of them, we don't have everybody here, but the people who are here just to say hello and introduce themselves. So Charlotte, to you.
Hello. Well, it's a real honour to have been asked to join this webinar by Helen. I'm delighted to be here to talk about this wonderful award. And my name is Charlotte Avery, and I'm headmistress at St Mary's School in Cambridge, which is a girls' school all the way through from 3 to 18, part boarding and part day. Thanks, Helen.
Oh, no, it's great to have you here, Charlotte. Well, thank you for letting me twist your arm. So how busy you are. And James, over to you.
Similarly, like Charlotte, absolutely delighted to be here and to be involved in the panel. It's been an amazing kind of experience, I have to say, as I'm sure we'd all agree. You know, the insight we gain into other schools and initiatives and impact, brilliant. So I'm headmaster here at Tunbridge School, which is a boarding and day school for boys 13 to 18. I came here in 2018, which means I had a year of sanity before the pandemic. But the Independent School Awards have kept me sane too throughout this, because we were lucky enough as a school to receive one of those awards, following which, much more exciting, was an invitation to join the panel. So really pleased to be here and to share some insights from that experience.
Oh, thank you, James. Thank you for that. Yeah. And Philippa, to you now.
Oh, well, I would echo everything that's already been said. I'm Philippa Scuds. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications down at Camford School, which is a boarding school for children aged 13 to 18 in Dorset. And like the other judges, I'm constantly blown away by the amazing things that everybody is doing in independent education at this time. And also, when I've read the entries each year, I do feel very proud to be part of this sector, and really looking forward to seeing what everybody puts forward for their submissions this year.
Lovely, thank you. And David, over to you.
Hello, I'm David Moncrief. I'm the consultant publisher of Independent School Parent, published by the Chelsea Magazine Company, which hosts the awards. And I should really say how absolutely delighted we are at the way the awards have developed over the past few years, with Helen in the chair. And we are very, very keen that they should continue to thrive. And if we can provide some useful advice to the entrants, which makes their awards even better, then let's hope that's what we achieve.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And David, of course, does keep us on track too, because he's the vice chair, so he makes sure that everything happens as well. But it's my privilege to be part of this great award panel, and we do have a really, really good time. We're looking at the depth of the quality of the awards, the applications when they're put through, and that's why we want to be here today, to help people who are watching, help you make sure that you put forward a really good application. Because I'm not going to go through all of the awards now. All that information is on the website, so do have a look at the website, and it sets out also what it is you need to do, and what the dates of when it opens, when the nominations close, and so on. There are 22 awards, and then there's an overall Independent School of the Year award, and some of those awards are restricted, for example, like the Small Schools Award or the Girls' Schools Award, but many of them are open to all, at whatever kind of independent school you are. So that said, we're going to be exploring that in a little bit more detail today, because how does a large school compare to a small school, for example? How do we look at that? How do we weigh things up? This is a lot of judgment and weighing things up. But the absolute key, and I've said this already, and I'll say it again, the absolute key is that we're really looking to understand the student experience, and we want to see because that's what's so special about our sector. Yes, people get good grades, yes, they go on to great places, but the experience that they have in school underpins all of that, and that's what we're really looking to illuminate, and we want to hear the story of that. We do need evidence as well for it, and that I know will come out as the judges speak a little bit about particular areas. So we need evidence for that. We want to understand the impact. We want to understand all of these different areas. But fundamentally, it comes down to telling the story of student experience. So I'm going to start. I've got a few questions to ask the judges, and we encourage the judges just to chip in at any point if they want to. But Charlotte, suppose we start with you. And there are a number of categories, aren't there, for specific types of schools? So like the pre-prep, girls' schools, and so on. What are we really looking for, do you think, within those specific categories? What would you highlight?
Thank you. So in a way, picking up what Philippa said right at the beginning, this is a real opportunity to celebrate and to shine a light on really amazing positive stories that the sector can generate. So what we're looking for when we come to the individual types of school is to try to think, well, how is, for example, your pre-prep school unique? What is its selling point? How do you do things differently than others? What do you think is most impressive about your experience for your students at pre-prep? And for example, how might that be different to students who are at a prep school or a senior school? So one thing to think about is obviously the age of the pupils within the category. Because as Helen has already said, it's about the impact of your work on the students, which makes these award categories slightly different than other sorts of award. So what we are really looking for is maybe the things that the students themselves have done. So if, for example, you've got some of the very youngest students who have contributed some ideas for a student council for some outdoor play, and then this is being used and it's been adjusted to their size and age, that's an innovative experience for some younger ones. Or, for example, if you are in a category like girls' schools or boys' schools, what makes your girls' or boys' school unique, different to other boys or girls' schools? So you might say, well, the girls are very, very interested at the moment in things like student voice, and they've done an amazing project working with journalists locally or raising awareness about something. But please, as Helen has said, think about the impact that an initiative or several have had on students within your type of school.
Mm-hmm. And there's something there as well, and you're picking that up, and I want to pick this up as well, because sometimes we take things for granted. You're emphasizing there that you've really got to think about this. We do take it for granted. And one of the categories, for example, the co-ed category, that's a category where sometimes people say, well, we've just got a good school, we've got a good school. But what is it about the nature of the co-edness? Like, what is it about the nature of the girls, the fact it's a girls' school? What about that has the impact on it? And does that resonates, doesn't it, Charlotte?
Yes, it does. And I think the other thing is to think very precisely about your school now, because some of you might have entered the awards in the past and then think, well, I've been successful, or indeed I haven't been successful. Is it worth me entering again? Well, as James has just said in his introduction, we're all continuing to live through this COVID experience. So you might reflect on your school over the last 2 years and think, well, what impact have the experiences or what the children have done in my school had, which is different to what it was pre-COVID. So a new initiative around that, or something like that, which builds into your type of school, is something that is very, very interesting. And I think another thing to say, and this goes back to something that Philippa said at the beginning, is it is about narrative and it is about storytelling. And so one thing to think about is, how are you actually telling your story? So it's not just about what you did. Part of this is how compelling, how well presented is your entry, and that's why we are looking for those particular stories. So one other final thing to say from me, and maybe Helen and some others would like to join in, is to say that we don't mind if you look at one particular initiative in a co-ed school or a prep school or a boys' school or girls' school in detail, or whether you want to talk about several things. But what I do think is that the idea or ideas has had to be embedded for a little while.
Yes.
You do actually need to see the impact. I don't think it's very helpful just to say, oh, we started an initiative 6 months ago, because you can't see the fruits of that yet. So try to think about initiatives and impact on students where there really it's been embedded maybe for at least a year or two, and you can really see some results. I hope that's helpful, Helen. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, you're picking up on something that I want to turn to James about there, because there's that sense of it's either or. It doesn't have to be everything, does it? You're talking there about, is it one thing in detail or is it something broader? Either of those are fine. We need to think about the story that's being told as part of it. I mean, James, one of the issues that sometimes people have, and they've asked questions about in the past, has been, how do we compare like a big school with masses of resources with a small school which may not, something that's urban with something rural? So how would you advise people to approach that from the perspective of their school?
No, it's a really important question, and just I was going to pick up on something that Charlotte said there about the embedding. I mean, I think she's absolutely right. The only thing I would observe is that COVID has rather changed timescales. 6 months is a long time. We've had so many innovations in 6 months, and they've been embedded, evaluated, and we've moved on to the next one. But I take the point, obviously, that you would obviously want to see something really become established and see the kind of evidence for it really having impact over time. But I make that point of difference only to also say, be aware you're writing for a panel of judges, and of course it's Helen's kind of challenge and role to and pleasure, I'm sure, to kind of coordinate us through our different perspectives and views.
That's great.
That's what's balanced.
Absolutely, that's why we have a panel, isn't it? Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
It is, and the panel. I mean, it's a great discussions that we have, and it's brilliant, of course, to listen and hear other people's reactions.
Yes.
But coming back to your question, I think for me, this was one of the questions that I had actually coming in as a judge. Was how do you compare? A large, well-resourced organization that may have put together a very, very considered strategic plan over a long period of time and been able to invest really meaningfully in that, with then perhaps a much shorter term initiative, or perhaps less ambitious, but only because the scale might be different, because the school setting is also really different. Charlotte's mentioned pre-prep, prep. It might be a small independent school, secondary school. Each school has got its own context and its own history, its heritage and identity. And how do you possibly compare all of these when they're different sizes, shapes, and have different purposes and so on? Well, it does offer us a kind of healthy challenge. But I think the one thing I'd say is that there's a degree of contextualization that we bring as judges to that. There's obviously an awareness of each school's kind of context that we will kind of bring into play in just weighing up the kind of resource they've been able to draw on. And arguably, of course, if you are, you might think, well, all the advantages lie in being a bigger school, but of course, arguably, a lot of advantages lie in being a smaller school, because you can be far more focused in the initiative. And perhaps, Charlotte was mentioning, I think really importantly, the involvement, engagement of pupils in whatever's been happening. And that's, arguably more possible in a smaller school, and perhaps the impact is more obvious in a smaller school setting. So it works both ways, I think, is the point, and certainly wouldn't want anyone to feel that they were, that this was going to be somehow disadvantaged in being considered contextually. I was really struck, in the most recent round of applications and submissions that we had, just how interesting it was to compare an example which had, a little bit like Charlotte said, kind of a real series of initiatives brought together very skillfully and evidenced, but really a kind of very deftly bringing together multiple examples, as opposed to a really single kind of focus on just one major initiative for perhaps a small school. And it was just really interesting to kind of weigh up which one in the end had the most impact, and perhaps kind of that you felt was worthy of celebration in terms of the
Yes.
student experience
Yes.
it had impacted on?
Yeah.
If you look at some of the awards, we obviously have an award for a small school, and we also have awards that go right across sporting achievement, performance, the performing arts, student careers, community outreach, healthy eating, you know, all, which is keenly contested for in my experience, and I'm only sorry it doesn't involve a kind of tasting for the judges. But all of these are obviously aspects of schools, of all schools, which can easily be evidenced by a smaller school.
Yes.
So I hope there's some reassurance and encouragement there.
Yes, and you said something important a few moments ago as well, which I want to pick up on, which is you said that it could be a range of initiatives, but you said they were very deftly woven together, words to that effect. And that seems to be really important, because what we don't want to see is just a list of you know, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. And particularly if it's not really about what the students are experiencing, but it's just that these are the things that have happened. So I think that's a really important point that you just made there, James. It comes back to the whole sense of that story, that the storytelling.
Yeah. I think the and I'm conscious when I'm reading these and you know, when we're evaluating them and discussing, is the tension, I suppose, between kind of evidencing with statistics and specific examples, and making that sufficiently punchy and telling in a way that doesn't detract from the overall kind of sense of story too. And if you can get that combination right, there's no doubt that that does help us to see and understand, you know, why you're so proud of what you've done.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
Helen, can I just add a point into this as well, which is actually about that each school has its own, you know, unique ethos, whether it's been founded 1,000 years ago or just 10 years ago, whether it has a school motto and crest or not. And part of what I think James is driving at here and about telling these stories is to make sure that the impact of the student is absolutely relevant to your school, the ethos of your school. So it goes back to the point I was making about being a prep school or girls' school or boys' school, or indeed co-ed, that therefore the values that your school espouses, you can actually evidence that in terms of the project or projects you're raising, because that will help embed the story, as James is saying. So if, for example, you're talking about healthy eating, if your school has been traditional, I don't know, some sort of naval establishment, or it's on the coast, or something about the location and the history is relevant, well, bring that context in to shape the narrative, to give it depth and weight. Thanks, Helen.
And we have also seen, and I think this is very appropriate, that move towards understanding, particularly, I mean, I don't want to just focus on food, but that sense of the sustainability. And this is tying it into the local context, but also the national context, the global context as well. So if that's part of the story, tell us the part of the story, because one of the things that we're looking at is what's the impact on the student here and now in their current school, but also what's the impact for them moving forward, moving into the world, the wider world. So we do want to see that in to some extent. But Philippa, I'm going to turn to you now, because some of the awards almost seem to cross over into the business element of schools, don't they? The kind of behind the scenes element there. You know, to when you're talking about marketing or talking about fundraising or so. I mean, what advice would you give around how schools can talk about that, but still follow the spirit of the award, which is around student experience? I mean, what would you say?
Yes, well, schools historically haven't really liked to see themselves as businesses, have they? but inevitably we are all accountable, you know. And I think working in the marketing communication side, and there'll be a lot of marketers who will be watching this, I'm sure. You know, the strategy the results of the strategy would be, and the success of it is, you know, an increased role, increased interest in the school, perhaps if you're doing fundraising, increased funds that have been brought in, and how to tie that back to the spirit of these awards, which is the pupil experience. And I suppose what I would say is that I would go back to the storytelling. I think that a compelling story, as any marketer knows, you know, is very powerful. But I would say that, so for example, if your strategy as marketers includes something like a dynamic brand, or, you know, dynamic education, it's not just how you demonstrate that in through the school and its offering, but it's also how the pupils then have been positively impacted through that strategy, and how it actually really plays out in what pupils have experienced. And it's not always easy to do that, but that's what we're really looking for. Is we're very happy to see some facts about how you have increased your role, or some excellent fundraising initiatives, and we have seen some really impressive entries in the past for that. But the schools that have really stood out have been the ones that have then said, and this is how we've demonstrated it for our pupils, and this is where it's taken them. And we do get an awful lot of entries, that's the other thing to say. And so a compelling story and a very strong layout for your entry really does stand out. So the more creative that you can be in the language that you use in order to demonstrate the answers to the particular category really does make a difference.
And do you know what, that's such an important point about that, and I want to go straight to David actually after you making that point, because I think there's a really lovely connection with the question I was going to ask you, David, which was about, with these stories, we obviously look at them as judges. I mean, we had over 700 entries last year. It was fantastic, absolutely brilliant. But we have to whittle them down, and we're looking for a worthy winner in each category. So many of them could have been winners. So we obviously do our bit. It's a very rigorous process. And you can see if this is just like a fraction of the panel, then there's a larger panel. We really spend our time looking at that. But those stories are also used, aren't they, David, by Independent School Parent magazine? I mean, do you want to just explain a bit about how they're used, and also for the benefit of schools as much as anything?
Well, yes, absolutely, Helen. I think it's a very important point to reiterate. The Independent School Parent portfolio of magazines really exists to celebrate and champion the independent school sector. We want to beat the drum for all that's great about an independent education in the UK. And we use the entries, we use the stories that we are told to inform our commissioning activity. And as I hope people will have seen who are familiar with the magazines, our editor will take the leading entries and look at them and then commission stories that are based around them. And so it is truly important, if it's possible, for those entries to convey the character, the spirit, and the values of the school, as Charlotte referenced earlier, because then we can weave them together into some really compelling journalism, which then we hope will communicate to parents and prospective parents and to wider stakeholders how truly excellent the student experience is within independent schools in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And that goes throughout the year as well, doesn't it? So it's not just sort of in one go. I mean, you can pop things up, and it's good to develop a relationship with schools. And I think you've said that in the past, haven't you, David, that independent school parent can then develop a bit of a relationship with schools to be able to highlight other really good practice that happens.
Well, absolutely. I think from our position as a publisher, the awards have given us an opportunity to get much closer to the school community, which hopefully that we can reflect what the schools are doing much more effectively, and to build a relationship with those schools. Over the past couple of months, I've been going around quite a few of our winners to present them with their awards, and it's been tremendous to be able to sit down with the head, with the marketing team, and with other members of the senior leadership, and just get a feel for the school, to understand what it's doing, because that will give us all sorts of insights that we can use when we're trying to commission new content for all our platforms. So it's a really invaluable relationship that the awards are letting us build.
And that's a question, Helen.
Thank you. Oh yes, I was going to say thank you to Independent School Parent as well for supporting our awards as well. So we mustn't forget to do that. But James, go for your question.
Well, I apologise for cutting across the important thank you, and I shall resign immediately. But I do,
don't do that.
I do want to just ask David, if I may, if it's okay to chip in. I'm interested in given we've talked a lot about story and the idea of making that compelling. Is there a pressure, therefore, that actually, the headline is going to be more exciting if it's about innovation, or actually is it as interesting to kind of discover excellence
Yeah. Well, we actually had a bit of that discussion last year, didn't we? Because we were talking about that, and looking at, and there is a specific category now about outstanding initiative, which is there, which captures a bit of that. But I remember, David, we were talking about that, and it was a mixture of both, because sometimes people don't recognise that what they're doing that's excellent. They don't think about telling people about it, but we want to hear, because not everyone else is. I mean, how does that resonate with you, David?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Helen. And Helen and I, when we do the preliminary shortlisting, sometimes sort of ring each other up and think, oh my goodness, we've got another 650 to read. And it is really important that the entries find a way of standing out and really conveying the story that they're telling. And I think there are all sorts of ways that can be achieved, but I would completely reiterate the point that was made earlier about, please don't give us lists. Please make sure that you tell us, if you're entering the boys' school category, why you're a good boys' school, not just why you're a good school. Yeah. Try and put a bit of warmth and a sense of context into your entries, because that's what's going to make you stand out. And I think I completely agree that don't overlook what may seem a bit of everyday activity, because if something that is in the DNA of your school, then that's probably what you need to convey, because that's going to give us as judges a feel for what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and how you're making the student experience so great.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And David, while we're talking to you, there are a couple of awards which aren't decided by the judges, but are decided by Chelsea, by the magazine. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about that? Because schools still put themselves forward, or put people forward for those awards, aren't they? Those two awards. Do you want to just say a little bit more about what we're looking for in each of those?
Well, the first of the two awards is the Rising Star Award, which is awarded annually to an individual student within one of the independent schools who has stood out in a particularly notable way. Now, this does not have to be an extreme sporting achievement or a stunning academic achievement, though it can be, and a couple of our previous winners have won on those grounds. But we've also had a nationally recognised fundraiser. We had a student who virtually came back from death's door to be able to compete in the Paralympics. And this year we had an absolutely outstanding young painter who's exhibited at the summer exhibition. So it's a quite remarkable spread of students. So I'd really encourage you to sort of look at your student body and think where there is a story of exceptional ability or exceptional achievement, but don't have a particular way of defining that. So once again, tell us the story.
Yes, keep it short. Yeah. And then the Unsung Hero Award, that was the Rising Star Award, the Unsung Hero Award.
The Unsung Hero Award was introduced last year in memory of one of the family that own Chelsea Magazine Company. And what we're looking for there is, as the name suggests, a member of the school community. Could be a student, it could be a member of staff, and of course we don't mean just the teaching staff, who perhaps makes a contribution that is critical to the life of the school, but perhaps isn't always recognised and certainly isn't right up on the front page of any school report. So last year, for example, it went to a head groundsman who had been with the school for nearly 30 years, and we were told used to come in and feed the school animals on Christmas Day and dug cars out of snow when they got stuck, and was basically always there. So I think the unsung hero is a chance to look around the school community and say, oh, there is somebody who makes all the difference. And I suspect that all my colleagues who are on this video who work within schools can probably think of colleagues of their own who absolutely tick the box there. So what we want to do is to celebrate that contribution, because we want to be able to display, to celebrate the excellence of independent schools in every shape and form.
I was actually going to say that as well, David, that when you're crafting your entry, it's great to get input from different members of staff, or different, rather than it always being written and entered by, say, the marketing team or a member of head of department. You know, it's great to see some input, you know, some quotes from different staff members, or indeed even better, really, in some award categories, from the pupils themselves.
Exactly.
You know, it would be lovely to see more of that, actually.
Yes, yeah, no, agreed. Well, look, we're coming to the end of our time here. So we've talked about, well, we've sort of looked at the themes that go through these 22 awards. We've got these 2 other awards. Don't forget as well, there was the overall Independent School of the Year award, which we all decide together as judges, and we draw that from one of those categories as well. I think we want to say that something is, a school is remarkable in some way, but as I said, so many of the schools are worthy winners, and I would encourage people to put in an application because it celebrates your community. So let's see those, you drawing that together. Sometimes it's surprising that you go, gosh, we really are good, aren't we? And that's super, and we want to be able to see that. We want to be able to see that because fundamentally, if you're doing that, then your students are benefiting and they will be thriving more. So I'm just going to ask the judges, Helen, is it worth saying something about Independent School of the Year overall? Well, in terms of what we're looking for that, I can say that because it's really broad, you know, because that Independent School of the Year, we don't go into it thinking, right, okay, we've got to tick these. It is usually, but hasn't always been, but usually is one of the winners of the other categories. Although sometimes we are attuned to the fact that sometimes people may be almost the winner, and actually across the board there's something very special there. And we deliberately don't say in advance what the criteria are for that, because that's why we're here as a panel. That's why we're together. However many of us there are now, we're there to be able to discuss that and think about that, and to say what, and to highlight a school which we'd just like to say, look, this is a school which is remarkable in what it's doing. It's for all sorts of reasons, and we'd name those reasons too, and hopefully that serves as a little bit of a flagship for a while for the sector, and particularly in relation to the student experience, which is what we keep coming back to. So that's that. So thank you, James, for making me say that a little bit more clearly. But is there anything else that any of the judges would like to say? Any final tips for people?
I would just say that from the school's point of view, and as a school that actually a few years ago we were very fortunate to win one of the awards, there is a real marketing opportunity as well for each school to really showcase. The Independent School magazine does an excellent job both in print and also online. Yes. Which you can then share share what they've written, and also champion on your own website and through your communications, if you are successful, and if you are even make the shortlist. So I would really encourage schools to get their thinking caps on and think of all the wonderful things that you are doing, because you really can see the benefits from that in your ongoing marketing with your current parents as well as with your prospectives.
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
And building on Philippa's point, as I think I have said before, my final point would be: do enter, even if you've entered before.
Yes.
And not been successful, or if you've entered before and been successful, enter again. And the other thing is enter multiple categories, because we are looking for these stories, and actually it makes you think very carefully about your school. Yes. Whoever is writing this, whether it's the marketing department, as Philippa says, other people in the school, but to think very strategically, to shine the spotlight on maybe one or two areas. But we want to hear from you, so please don't be shy in coming forward, and we will look forward very, very much to reading a lot of entries in multiple categories. Thanks, Helen.
And James, anything that you'd like to add? Any final tips?
Obviously endorse all that's been said. It is great fun to take part in the competition. It's obviously even more rewarding to be recognised within it publicly. But we're all, I'm sure, all very proud of what's happening in our schools, and it's always good to be able to share the fact that your school is great. What's even more rewarding, I think, is to say it's great because. Yes. And just the process of thinking about that as a school and articulating that will be really valuable, and hopefully might mean, that you also win one of these very special awards.
Yes, yeah. And
I also think, Helen, sorry, just one other thing that's crossed my mind is that these awards are very special because they are celebrating the pupil experience.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, that's why we all work in education, isn't it? For the benefit of the pupils, and I think that's why these awards are pretty special, actually.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And that's the real heart of the awards. I mean, it's what drives everybody around this virtual table we have here in front of you. But David, any final words from you before we draw it to a close?
Well, I just reiterate the word that we've heard so many times, and that is, please tell us your story, because we, as the publishers of Independent School Parent, would love to share that story with our audiences and hopefully build greater recognition still of the extraordinary independent school education that is available in the UK.
Well, thank you. So I'd like to say thank you to Independent School Parent magazine. I'd still like to say thank you to the judges we have here. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's been watching this. We hope it's been really, really useful for you. And we very much look forward to seeing your entries, 22. So nominations open 16th of March. They close the 27th of May. So get writing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.